Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, President Trump announces a phased-in ceasefire in the fighting between Israel and Iran. Also tonight, DACA recipients speak out over nationwide immigration raids. And the Phoenix Library rolls out its summer schedule of events. Those stories and more next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your public television station.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. President Trump this afternoon announced a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. The president said that the two countries, quote, fully agreed to a complete and total ceasefire to start at about 9 p.m. Arizona time, when the president said Israel and Iran will have completed their in-progress final missions. The president said that the ceasefire will then be phased in for 24 hours, at which point the president said, quote, the war will be considered ended. Now, the president made the announcement on social media just minutes after both Israel and Iran warned of future strikes. The president's ceasefire announcement followed Iran firing missiles at a U.S. military base in Qatar. There were no U.S. casualties reported. The U.S. and Qatar both say that they intercepted the Iranian medium-range and ballistic missiles. Also, Iranian officials reportedly gave advance notice that the strikes were comting to minimize casualties. The targeted air base is the largest American military installation in the Middle East, with about 10,000 troops stationed there. The U.S. has been using the base since the days after the September 11th attacks in 2001. Now, today's ceasefire announcement by the president also followed escalation from Israel, which launched wide-ranging strikes on Tehran. Smoke and damage seen here. Also today, prior to the ceasefire announcement, Iran continued to fire missiles into Israel. We will have more on the conflict in the Middle East, much more in just a moment. Other headlines: the U.S. Supreme Court today allowed the Trump administration to restart deportations of migrants to countries other than their own homelands. A lower court had blocked such deportations, saying that migrants needed a chance to prove that they could be in danger of torture if sent away from their home countries. The High Court did not give a detailed reasoning for ordering the deportations to continue. All three liberal justices, they dissented from that order. And the Arizona House today is expected to pass a short-term version of the budget that the House Republicans passed last week. But if passed, the governor is expected to veto that spending plan, having worked with the Senate on a budget that the Senate passed and sent to the House. The state is 1 week away from a government shutdown if Republicans in the House and Senate can't come together for a budget that the governor will sign. As we mentioned, President Trump went on social media about an hour or so ago here and announced a phased-in ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Now, this follows the U.S. attacking Iranian nuclear facilities this weekend, which prompted Iran to fire missiles at a U.S. air base in the Middle East. For an overview of all this, we welcome Dr. Evelyn Farkas, Executive Director of the McCain Institute. Always a pleasure. Good to have you here, Evelyn. Thank you so much for your time. First of all, what do we make? I mean, we're recording this about 4 o'clock Monday afternoon here. It's been an hour now. Do we really know what's going on with the ceasefire?
Well, no, Ted, because this is kind of an unconventional announcement where the U.S. president, which isn't supposedly party to this war, is announcing that there's a ceasefire between Iran and Israel, but we don't see any statements coming out of those capitals. And so I'm not really sure whether we can consider it a credible statement until the leaders of those two countries also acknowledge that they are actually working towards a ceasefire.
And if they do, let's go ahead and say that there was some sort of agreement and the president just went ahead and announced on social media what maybe they wanted to wait for him to announce. Be that as it may, does that mean that the U.S. bombing on Iranian nuclear facility, was that a success?
Well, I would say in the short term, Ted, that it was a success, and it follows Israeli success bombing nuclear sites and military sites as well. So we know that the Iranian nuclear weapons program has been set back, and that is a success. The rest, of course, remains to be seen. What happens in the medium to long term? Does the Iranian government have an ability to reconstitute? How quickly can they do it? And in the meantime, what happens internally in Iran? Those are all really important points. But the most important point is having a ceasefire and then a negotiation with the outside parties to make sure that the war that started between Israel and Iran is definitively over.
And yet you talk negotiations just after hours after the U.S. bombed the Iranian nuclear facilities. Iran emphasized no more talks with the U.S. They can't be trusted because of the deception that Iran saw involved. Do they have a point?
Well, they have a point, but this is all diplomacy, and this is all, this falls into the category, I think, of diplomatic bluster. Iran is weakened. It's in their interest right now to negotiate. Honestly, it's in their interest even to negotiate in bad faith. They just cannot afford to be hit militarily again. But by the same token, if they don't negotiate in good faith, they know that they have an American president who's not predictable. And frankly, they also have the threat of sanctions, because this hasn't been covered very widely. But the agreement that the Obama administration signed, the United States left under President Trump, and this was an agreement to halt Iran's nuclear weapons program. The Europeans actually, when the sanctions were lifted by the Europeans and the U.S. ultimately wasn't part of the agreement anymore, they had a snapback, so a provision where they could reinstate sanctions on Iran. If Iran looks like it's not negotiating in good faith, and by the way, even before these attacks by Israel, the UN inspectors, the UN agency responsible for the inspections, had already come out with a statement basically pointing a finger at Iran, saying they were in violation. If Iran doesn't come back into agreement, seem to be in compliance with ending or putting a halt on their nuclear weapons program, the Europeans can sanction them, and they don't want that either.
So they don't, obviously, they're not in a good position. Iran is simply not in a good position in a variety of ways, but they can cause havoc and they can make a mess. Strait of Hormuz, you can cause problems there. Oil prices, you can cause problems there. Are those serious issues right now, or is the way this is playing, are those a little bit in the background?
I think, Ted, it looks like they've made the calculus that Tehran, has as much to lose from closing the Straits of Hormuz as any other country, because they rely on that mode of transportation, that area, to also get their oil and gas out to the larger markets. We know that China gets about 80-something percent, I think it's 84% of its oil and gas from Iran, actually, through those straits. And about, I think, 15% of the total oil goes through there. So it will cause a lot of pain, especially in Asia. And I'm not sure that the Iranians want to also inflict the pain on themselves. In addition to that, I would say that the Europeans are watching this closely, because it's not in their interest to watch the oil prices go up, because in another part of the world, they're trying to have the oil prices reduced so that Vladimir Putin, who's still able to sell oil on the open market, doesn't make as much money to put into his war against Ukraine.
I'm glad you mentioned Putin. Russia has been very, very quiet throughout all of this. What do you make of that?
I think it's because Russia recognizes that, number one, this is a nice diversion from what they're doing to Ukraine. I mean, they have been lobbing a lot of missiles and drones at the Ukrainian population. Second, of course, they don't mind the crisis drawing out and potentially raising the price of oil, but they probably don't want to say so publicly, because they might make Beijing angry. So I think for them, it's just being quiet and watching this play out. There's no downside to that for them right now.
I was going to say, and Iran is probably saying, thanks a lot. Such a friend you are.
Well, that's the downside, that they look less reliable.
And yes, they look less strong. What about what's going on in Iran with the populace, with the people? How are they handling, the U.S. airstrikes? Obviously, we're targeting nuclear facilities, not residential areas, these sorts of things. But there's always been a talk that the population there is restless. They don't like the leadership. They're looking for change. Does this tilt things one way or the other?
Yeah, it is interesting to see how this plays out. It depends on what happens next. So, of course, the Iranian people, while they are proud, and I'm sure they would be proud to have the nuclear weapon, but they are very angry at this current theocracy, the dictatorship of the religious that have ruled them for these decades. We know most of the women are opposed, and most Iran experts say that there's only about 20% of the population that supports Iran. Supports the government, the regime. The other thing is, of course, that Iran is made up of different ethnic groups, so not everyone is Persian ethnicity. So it is an interesting situation internally. Israel has made the situation a little bit more difficult because they have struck some civilian targets, like one of the major newsrooms, and so that caused the Iranian people, of course, to feel a bit of nationalism, to include some of the dissidents. So they have spoken out against Israel and against these strikes. So it's complicated and nuanced, but I think if Israel were to stop, if we were to have a ceasefire, then I think the Iranian people would be free, frankly, to not worry about nationalism and threats from the outside, but to take matters into their own hands internally.
Well, taking matters into their own hands internally could mean something as serious as a civil war. Is that a possibility here?
Well, a civil war is always possible if you are dealing with a government that falls into crisis or collapses. So if the military turns against the theocratic regime, against the Ayatollahs, then the question is, what happens next? Is someone able to then take control? Can the political powers that be in opposition and the outside forces, frankly, the United States, the European Union, and others, broker some kind of transitional government until you can get to elections, which is, by the way, what we did in Ukraine. I mean, the leadership, essentially, the military shot civilians and then realized they didn't want to be on the wrong side of history. So, and the people definitely abandoned the Kremlin-backed leader in 2014. And so the international community stepped in and brokered a transition with all the opposition forces, Russia, the European Union, the United States. So we've seen this happen before. It's possible. But you can't bring about regime change, Ted, through bombs. You really need a ceasefire, and you need the people in Iran to sort this out for themselves.
Okay, last question here, because we're running out of time, but I want to get your thoughts on what do we look for next?
Well, I think we look for Israeli missiles to stop flying through the air, because that would indicate a ceasefire, and same for the Iranians. And then we look for real negotiations, because ultimately we have to put Iran's nuclear ambition, get it deeply buried underground, hopefully until there can be a new regime, which is essentially what happened in the example of Syria, where Syria's nuclear facilities were also bombed, and Bashar al-Assad pretty much gave up on the nuclear experiment, and eventually, of course, he was overthrown. All
right, great information. Dr. Evelyn Farkas, again, the McCain Institute. Always good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ted, for the opportunity.
A quiet crisis that spares no one.
For America to thrive, our citizens need to be cared for and healthy. They're neither of those.
Millions of us helping care for millions more.
These are heroic people that are caregivers, period.
The everyday champions fighting for all of us.
The story of caregiving in America is everyone's story. That unity is powerful.
Tuesday night at 8 on Arizona PBS.
It's about to go down.
We're just surrounded by weirdness and absurdity all the time.
It transforms everything.
I think I just fell in love.
I'm turning dreams into reality.
What did we do? How did we get here?
Wednesday night at 8 on Arizona PBS.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, why Iran's retaliation for U.S. strikes could signal a desire to de-escalate the conflict. That's at 6 on Arizona PBS.
Immigration raids continue across the country with undocumented and documented migrants feeling the impact. The concerns extend to DACA recipients who've been granted protection from deportation under the DACA program. Joining us now is DACA recipient Reina Montoya, founder and CEO of Aliento. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you as well.
Define Aliento before we get too far in here.
Yeah, aliento translates into breath, but when you give aliento to someone, it's like giving words of encouragement. So that's what we do, give hope to our students.
Yes, and these are DACA students. This is who you focus on.
Yeah, DACA students and immigrant students are from immigrant families.
Okay, has your mission changed? Have you had to change what you're doing, how you're doing it since the start of the year?
Definitely how we do it. I think that right now there's a more heightened distrust with any institutions. Thankfully, we have had good trust with our community, but now people are more hesitant in being able to come forward and ask for help because they're afraid that the government is going to get a hold of that information.
Even coming forward to Aliento?
I think that people are really concerned about going to events in person, so we had to modify it and being able to reach and meet the community where they're at.
The president was supposed to focus on violent criminals. That's what we heard when this deportations and the ICE immigration programs first started. Is that happening?
That's not what I'm seeing in the ground. That's not what I'm seeing in the reports that are coming out of USCIS and detention. Right now, if that was the case, why are students across the nation who are high school students who couldn't qualify for the DACA program are getting detained at traffic violations? We have seen it in Utah, in New York, in Massachusetts, in California, in Georgia, and the list goes on. The other thing that recently happened just last week was that for years there were cases that were administratively closed by ICE, by judges, and they're being reopened and recalendared. Why are we going after those folks that they already determined that their case should be closed?
Your thoughts, again, there are arrests outside courtrooms, and we've talked about this in other avenues here. The case is dismissed, the people come out, they show up for the hearing, case dismissed, they come out, they're detained. What are your thoughts on this?
If we're having a conversation about not liking current immigration law, that's a separate conversation. Currently, like it or not, or despite of people's reactions on the immigration process, the truth of the matter is that these folks did everything right. The process of the U.S. government was to go to the CBP One app, file a claim. That's the process. People did it, they went through the legal channels, and they did it the right way, and they're still going and apprehending them at courts. That is so out of line.
Is that a new tactic?
That's something that we haven't seen in this scale. There were a couple of instances from what I've been doing my research and asking questions that happened under the Bush administration in very isolated parts. This is something that we haven't seen at this scale from what I've read up.
And we've seen this in courthouses here. As far as immigration raids, massive immigration raids, what are we seeing in Arizona? Are they few and far between? Are there any regularity to them? What are you seeing?
It is really hard to understand. ICE is not being as forthcoming about their apprehensions. We are seeing that Border Star Homan has said that everybody who's here undocumented is a free-for-all. We are seeing more activity on ICE. I think it's really hard to pinpoint because right now they're not being dressed in the appropriate gear, and it's really hard and scary because what about if these are other folks that are not necessarily associated with a federal agency that are making these things? I think that crime is going to increase because of these inaccuracies in operations.
Well, and also, what do you think about the idea that drives people underground? We'd heard that about immigration enforcement in the past, it drives people away from society, away from the norms, away from calling police, away from law and order, court cases, the whole 9 yards. Do you see that happening here?
We don't have to imagine that. We've lived that through SB 1070. And more recently, I had a student who is born here, and she didn't want to go and say that someone hit her car because she was afraid that that could potentially expose her family members who don't have the right documentation.
And yet, Rena, those who agree with what the president's doing and those who think that this is a good thing, they call this an invasion. They say that the president himself said unauthorized immigrants are destroying schools, hospitals, and destroying communities. How do you respond to that?
I was one of those undocumented individuals who's a DACA recipient who has generated thousands and thousands of money and employed U.S. citizens, who have been a teacher, who have impacted the lives of hundreds of students. That's not who we are. That's not what the data says. The majority of undocumented people have been paying taxes, have been doing the best that they can to get right with the law. The problem is that our immigration system is completely broken and it hasn't been reformed since 1986.
Is it harder to get immigrants now, as opposed to even last year or 5 years ago, to register with the government?
What do you mean by that?
Well, just the Trump administration wants to see more registration as far as people who are here, whether or not here legally or not. Is that something that you've heard about? Is that something that's happening out there? Is that just a speaking point? What?
I mean, I think that people are going to have more mistrust, even those folks that are following their legal pathways. Right now, we're seeing that ICE is outside of USCIS. For the regular folks that don't know that, that's typically the department that processes all the legal migration. People are afraid of going there because they're like, what about if I get denied? Am I going to get detained?
Last question. What are you telling people that come to you for advice?
I am not an attorney. I'm telling them to please go see an attorney if money's a barrier. Talk to us so we can potentially pair you up with a couple of trusted attorneys. Is to not wait until the last minute. Right now, if something has changed in your life because you got married, because you have been a victim of a crime, this is the time to speak to an attorney and not to lose hope. There's a saying in Spanish that hope is the last thing that dies. So I do believe that in the goodness of American people, they want to process, and majority of them are good people when they get to understand how dysfunctional our system is, and hopefully we can get out of this soon.
Reyna Montoya with Aliento, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
Phoenix Public Library has a summer-long schedule of events and programs for children and adults. The programs include things like reading and art classes, and we learn more about all this from the library's Lee Franklin. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah,
I love coming to talk to you.
Oh, that's good. That's good to hear because
Always, yeah.
You got a lot of stuff going on over there.
Always.
Huh?
Oh, summer is like, it is the place to be. The library is the best place to come to, especially during the summer. We've got lots of great fun stuff that's all free, family friendly, and in out of the heat.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a great place to be because it's got air conditioning.
That's right. Right. Yes. We cross our fingers and knock on wood.
Yes.
Our buildings are chugging away, keeping everyone cool.
Did the lineup this year, does it change much year to year?
A little bit for summer reading. It's our annual program, so it kicks off June 1st, goes through August 1st. We have lots of fun, great programs for everyone. And a lot of them are repeaters. They're ones that are favorites that we bring back every summer, and then we try new things out every year as well.
I'm seeing the Make Music Phoenix. Is that now, are those performances? What's going on with that?
Yes, it's a partnership that we do with Rosie's House that specifically brings music education and access to all kinds of different elements of music. They're a nonprofit, and they do a lot with us. And so, yes, there's performances, there's interactive, hands-on stuff, there's music-related crafts. Plus, I would think no matter what the program is or whatever it is that people are doing at the library this summer, what we are finding that we're hearing a lot of is really resonating with people is that it's a connection with community, which I feel like a lot of us kind of miss in a lot of ways. So.
Yeah, I know. There are crafting classes that gets everyone together, and something called Adult Crafternoon.
Oh, Adult Crafternoon, yeah. So do you remember Shrinky Dinks?
I know,
those of us of a certain age.
Yeah, I'm not of that certain age. No, I don't know what you're talking about.
They were a fun craft activity that we, me of a certain age, played with when we were growing up, my brother and sister and I and our friends. And so that is one of the things that's featured in Adult Crafternoon. So if you're interested about learning how to, have a craft project or learn a new skill or, way to have some quality time in a quiet way, meeting, connecting with others.
Yes.
We have a couple of our branches do a regular adult crafternoon.
Wow.
Come escape at the library.
Navajo Kitchen, you can learn traditional cuisine, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. With an author, Alana Yazzie, her book, she comes and she talks about modern Navajo culinary and a lot of the cultural elements. And yeah, we just had one of those at one of our branches on Saturday.
Very good, very good. You had dancing classes, flamenco, you have Bollywood dancing classes.
Yes, that's become a very popular program.
Wow.
And so everything is for it's family friendly, all ages. We've got stuff for kids specifically, but really start with us at any age. Come visit Phoenix Public Library and sign up for summer reading.
Yeah.
Of course, we're about the reading.
Of course, yeah, you better be. There better be some
we
reading going on there.
incorporate that into everything.
But I also know you got yourself a bingo night, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Bingo. Yep. We've got truly, anything that you could be looking for. Start with the library. You'll find something there.
Well, I was going to say, are people surprised that this kind of stuff goes on at the library?
Yes, we hear that a lot. We hear two things. They're kind of paired together. One is, oh, I love the library. The library is so important. I love the library and that it exists. But then quickly following that is, I had no idea that you guys did so much all the time.
And so for someone that wants to find out more about what's going on, it's a ton of classes. We just scratched the surface here. Where do they go?
Come visit phoenixpubliclibrary.org. You can learn all about summer reading, how to sign up, the prizes, all of the different events. We've got them presented by age, by topic, by location. And then get started with getting your library card.
Yeah, is that what the library card looks like?
This is it. Yes, this is our current Phoenix Pub. Make sure it's not upside down.
Yeah.
I do that sometimes.
All right.
Yeah, come visit us, phoenixpubliclibrary.org.
All right, Lee Franklin, good to see you.
Ted Simons, I'm your biggest fan.
Oh, I love to hear that. Good luck this summer. Stay out of the heat.
Thank you. Yeah, come visit us.
Okay, and that's it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening.